If you hate being told what to do, this video was made exclusively for you. Think about it. Have you ever felt a hot flash, an almost electric surge, shoot up your spine the exact moment someone gave you an order? Not a complex or dangerous order, but something simple, maybe even obvious. A suggestion that, coming from someone else, felt like shackles snapping onto your wrists. If your answer is yes, then this video isn't just for you. It's about you. Let's paint a picture that might feel familiar. You're at work, completely in the zone, deep into a task that demands your full concentration. You've found your rhythm. The ideas are flowing, and you know exactly what needs to be done. Then your boss walks over and, in a tone that's meant to be helpful, says, "Hey, don't forget to send that report by the end of the day, okay?" Here's the thing, not only is the report on your mind, it's almost finished, maybe even scheduled to send. But the phrase, the micro-order, the implied distrust that you might forget. Something inside you just snaps. That productive flow is shattered by a sudden, visceral irritation. It's a physical reaction. You feel your jaw clench, your chest tighten, and an almost childish impulse to snap back. I know. Or worse, a sudden urge to procrastinate, to wait until 5:59 p.m. to send the report, not because you're irresponsible, but as a silent act of protest, to reassert that you are in control of your own time and your own actions. This feeling isn't just limited to work. It happens when a family member insists on giving you unsolicited advice about your life choices. It happens in traffic when someone in the passenger seat says, "The light's about to turn green," as if you couldn't see it. Each of these moments, no matter how trivial they may seem, triggers the same internal alarm. Why does this happen? Why can a simple phrase feel like a territorial invasion? Why do your body and mind go into defense mode against a suggestion that, for most people, would be harmless? What if I told you that this reaction, which society often labels as stubbornness, insubordination, or having a problem with authority, is not a character flaw? What if, in fact, it's the sign of one of your greatest and most misunderstood strengths? This video isn't a manual on how to become more obedient. It's a journey into the psychology of autonomy. We're going to explore why some of the most brilliant, innovative, and creative minds in history shared this exact same trait. An aversion to being controlled isn't a weakness. It's the engine of self-will, the signature of a spirit that refuses to be a mere follower. Stay with me because we're about to unravel the psychological concept behind this immediate reaction. And I promise, by understanding what's happening in your mind, you'll start to see this trait not as a problem to be fixed, but as the key to your maximum potential. We're going to dive into the science of psychological reactance and discover why, for you, freedom isn't just a desire, it's a fundamental need. But first, I want to make a deal with you. Go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel now to keep getting more content like this. If you don't like it by the end, you can just take it back. Deal? Let's get started. This almost biological need to push back when you feel pressured isn't just a whim. It has a name and a scientific explanation, and understanding it is the first step to turning this raw force into a precision tool. The name of this phenomenon is psychological reactance. The concept was formalized in 1966 by psychologist Jack Brem. The theory is elegantly simple, but its implications are profound. Brehm postulated that when human beings feel their freedom of choice is being threatened or eliminated, they experience an aversive motivational state called reactance. To alleviate this state, they become more likely to perform the forbidden behavior or to oppose the attempt at influence. In other words, it's the boomerang effect of human psychology. Tell someone they can't do something, and that something becomes irresistibly attractive. This manifests in all areas of life. Think about a diet. The moment you decide a food is forbidden, it becomes the center of your thoughts. The act of forbidding not only limits your choice, but also activates reactance, causing your brain to fight against the imposed restriction. The craving for the forbidden chocolate isn't just hunger. It's a cry for autonomy. We see this in teenagers who, when faced with their parents' disapproval of a relationship, cling even more tightly to their partner. The attempt at external control inadvertently strengthens the couple's determination to prove their choice is valid. Reactance creates a siege mentality, uniting them against the threat to their freedom to love. For you who feels this so acutely, reactance isn't just a psychological curiosity. It's your operating system. Your sensitivity to the loss of autonomy is higher than most. What is a suggestion to others is a hard line for you. Your boss's order about the report doesn't irritate you because of the content of the order, but because of what it symbolizes, a micro-invalidation of your competence and your control over your own work. It's a subtle threat to your freedom to manage your own responsibilities. And your system, calibrated to protect this freedom at all costs, sounds the alarm. But this need for autonomy isn't just a defensive reaction, a mechanism to shield yourself from external control. It's something much deeper, a driving force that philosophers have tried to decipher for centuries. It's the expression of a fundamental energy that fuels creation and self-overcoming. And this leads us directly to the heart of your nature, the will to power. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche introduced the concept of the will to power. Wills are matched. Contrary to popular interpretation, this is not a crude desire to dominate others. It is, in its essence, the fundamental drive of every being to expand its strength, to grow, to overcome obstacles, to become more than it is. It's the artist's impulse to transform a blank canvas into a work of art, the athlete's drive to break a record, the thinker's quest to organize the chaos of ideas into a coherent theory. It is the will to imprint your own mark on the world, to turn potential into reality. In this context, Nietzsche speaks of the free spirit, the individual who detaches from the values and truths imposed by society, tradition, or religion, and dares to create their own values. The free spirit doesn't follow the herd because their will to power compels them to forge their own path. Now connect this to your aversion to orders. When someone tells you what to do, they are, in essence, trying to impose their will upon yours. They are trying to replace your values, your judgment, and your plan of action with theirs. For a free spirit, whose driving force is self-overcoming and the creation of their own values, an external order is not just an annoyance. It's an act of existential suppression. It's an attempt to reduce your will to power to a mere tool for someone else's. Your visceral anger is the healthy reaction of an organism that refuses to be diminished. This is why this trait is so common among creators, artists, and thinkers. They can't just execute someone else's vision without question, because their very nature forces them to generate their own. The order to paint this picture this way is an insult to the painter's will to power, which needs to express its own interpretation of reality. This same idea echoes powerfully in the work of the American philosopher and essayist Ralph Waldo Emerson, especially in his seminal essay, Self-Reliance. Emerson argues for a radical trust in one's own intuition and judgment. One of his most famous and cutting lines is, "Imitation is suicide." For Emerson, every individual possesses a divine spark, a unique internal compass. To blindly follow others, to conform to society's expectations, is to betray that essence, to commit a form of spiritual suicide. He writes, "Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string." Society, according to Emerson, is a conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members. It constantly pressures us to abandon our own route to follow the safe, well-trodden path. The truly self-reliant person, however, understands that their only sacred duty is to their own nature. The voice that screams inside you when you receive an obvious order, the discomfort you feel when being micromanaged, is the voice Emerson would call your divine intuition, your internal compass, fighting to be heard. It is your most authentic self refusing to commit the suicide of imitation. It is your will to power refusing to be tamed. Now that we understand the psychological basis of reactance and the philosophical depth of the will to power and self-reliance, the practical question becomes inevitable. What happens when a person with this mental wiring enters the real world, especially the traditional workplace? The answer explains why so many of you feel like a lion in a cage inside corporate offices. And more importantly, it reveals why this supposed problem with authority is, in fact, your greatest and most powerful professional asset. The traditional corporate world, for the most part, was not designed for free spirits. It was designed for efficiency through conformity. The hierarchies, the standardized processes, the long chains of approval, all of this was created to ensure predictability and control, minimizing risk. It is a system that, by its nature, rewards obedience and adherence to the rules. For the person with a high need for autonomy, this environment is a minefield of reactance triggers. Micromanagement isn't seen as support, but as distrust. Meetings that could have been an email are not just a waste of time, but a violation of your autonomy over how to use your most productive hours. The need to ask for permission to test a new approach, even when you know it's better, is frustrating because it subordinates your competent judgment to bureaucracy. It's like asking a bird to excel in a swimming competition. The problem isn't the bird, but the environment that is fundamentally unsuited to its nature. You don't last in traditional corporate jobs not because you're incompetent or lazy, in fact. You're really likely one of the most competent and visionary on the team, but because every day you are forced to commit small acts of suicide by imitation, you are forced to suppress your will to power to fit into a system that values conformity over innovation. What society calls a problem with authority is actually a highly effective bullshit filter. It's the inability to tolerate inefficiency. It's the refusal to follow an order simply because I said so. It's the need to understand the why behind a task. And if the why is illogical or stupid, Your internal system rejects the entire premise. And it's exactly here that the seed of innovation and entrepreneurship lies. The person who hates being told what to do is the first to ask, what if we did it a different way? What if there's a better way? Dissatisfaction with the status quo is not just a feeling. It's a driving force. Discomfort with existing rules is what fuels the creation of new rules, new systems, new products, and new markets. The greatest innovators in history were not known for their ability to follow orders. They were known for their stubbornness in following their own vision, even when everyone around them said it was impossible or reckless. They didn't fit the mold because they were too busy building a new one. The refusal to follow the script was precisely what allowed them to write an entirely new script that the rest of the world would eventually follow. This problem with authority is therefore a sign of latent leadership, but not necessarily leadership in the traditional sense of managing people. It's the leadership of an idea. It's the will to take full responsibility for a vision and execute it with excellence. The authority you seek is not power over others, but authority over your own creation, your own project, your own destiny. It's the authority that emanates from competence and vision, not from a title on an org chart. Many believe this trait is a path to chaos, a rebellion without a purpose. But the real danger isn't having the strength, but not knowing how to use it. And this is where we differentiate the rebel from the sovereign. This leads us to the final and most crucial point: how to channel this aversion to control into a life of autonomy with responsibility. We've reached the turning point. We understand the visceral reaction, the science of psychological reactance, and the philosophy of the will to power. We've seen how this internal wiring makes you unfit for corporate conformity and, at the same time, primes you for innovation. But all this energy, all this aversion to control, can go down two drastically different paths. One leads to chronic frustration and self-sabotage. The other, to mastery and full realization. This is the fundamental difference between being a rebel without a cause and becoming the sovereign of yourself. Let's be brutally honest. The energy of reactance in its raw state is chaotic. The rebel without a cause is moved purely by opposition. His actions are defined by what he is against. He needs a wall to punch, an authority to challenge. His identity is built on negation. He is the employee who procrastinates on a task just because it was ordered, even if it hurts his own advancement. He is the person who rejects good advice just because it wasn't his idea. The rebel defines his freedom as the absence of external rules, but rarely replaces them with internal ones. He breaks the chains but doesn't know what to do with his free hands. The problem with the rebel's identity is that it's parasitic. It depends on the existence of an authority to feel alive. Without something to push against, the rebel feels empty, purposeless. He fights for freedom but fears the responsibility that comes with it. If he fails, the blame always lies with the system, the boss, the stupid rules. He is never the owner of his failure, and therefore can never truly be the owner of his success. The sovereign of oneself, on the other hand, operates on a completely different plane. His driving force is not opposition, but proposition. He is not defined by what he hates, but by what he wishes to build. His energy is not spent fighting the system, but creating his own. The difference is subtle but monumental. The rebel sees a stupid rule and breaks it on principle. The sovereign sees the same stupid rule, understands its inefficiency, and designs a better process that makes the rule obsolete. The sovereign's focus is not on the act of breaking, but on the act of creating. He is not running away from someone else's control. He is running toward control of himself. And this brings us to the word that separates the boy from the man, the rebel from the sovereign: responsibility. True autonomy is not the freedom to do whatever you want. It is the courage to take full responsibility for the results of your choices. When you are the sovereign of your own kingdom, there is no one to blame. If your business fails, the responsibility is yours. If your project fails, the responsibility is yours. If your life is not what you want it to be, the responsibility is yours. This weight is terrifying to the rebel. But for the sovereign, it is the ultimate source of power. Because if the responsibility for failure is yours, the glory for success is also yours. Taking 100% responsibility means you have 100% of the agency to change your situation. You are no longer a victim of circumstances or other people's orders. You are the primary cause in your own life, so how do you make this transition? How do you channel the fury of reactance into the focused discipline of sovereignty? The first step is a mental shift, from what am I against to what am I for? Every time you feel that wave of anger against an order or an attempt at control, stop, breathe, and instead of focusing on the irritation, ask yourself, what is the outcome I want here? What is my vision for this situation? Instead of, I hate that my boss micromanages me, shift to, I will create a work system so efficient and transparent that micromanagement becomes unnecessary and illogical. You use the energy of frustration not to attack, but to build a superior alternative. The second step is to develop what I call solitude mastery. The rebel needs an audience for his rebellion. The sovereign builds his empire in silence. It is in solitude that you step away from the noise of external expectations and orders and hear your own voice. It is in solitude that you define your own values, your own standards of excellence, standards that must be higher than anyone could ever impose on you. It is in solitude that you plan, that you study, that you build your competence to a level so undeniable that your authority becomes self-evident. People stop giving you obvious orders when they realize you are operating on a level they can't even fully comprehend. Your aversion to being controlled is not a defect. It's a calling. It's a calling to stop trying to fit into systems that weren't made for you and instead to create your own. Whether it's a business, an art project, a new methodology within your company, or simply the way you structure your life, you don't hate authority. You hate illegitimate authority, the authority that comes from a title and not from competence. Your soul longs for the only true authority, the authority that emanates from truth, excellence, and personal responsibility. The world doesn't need more rebels who just point out what's wrong. The world desperately needs more sovereigns. People who have the courage to trust their own compass, the discipline to build their own vision, and the responsibility to bear the consequences. People who transform their will to power not into a scream of anger, but into a cathedral of accomplishment. Your visceral reaction to control is not a problem to be fixed. It is your internal compass telling you that you were made for more. It is telling you that your place is not in the ranks of followers, but in the arena of creators. You are a mind strategist, and your aversion to orders is your greatest asset. The signature of your potential to lead, to innovate, and finally, to be the one and true author of your own life. Now tell me, do you agree with the content of this video? Whether you agree or not, please let us know why in the comments. Your comment could help someone else see that there are other people with the same characteristics. Take the opportunity to like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.